Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. This podcast is a complement to the Numinous School, an online intuition development course for people who want their self-awareness to serve a greater good. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, and this week my guest is my dear, beloved teacher, Judee Gee. And we're talking about spiritually working with masculine and feminine energies. I connected with Judee over Skype. She was at home in Saint-Saturnin-les-Aptes, France. So Judee, it's great to have you back on the show again. I had such a great time in our last conversation, but there was still so much I wanted to talk to you about. So thanks for coming back.
Thank you, Carmen. Great pleasure to be with you again.
What I really am curious about and what I'd like to talk to you about today is about your take on the interplay between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And those two principles, I think in the West, are very often framed by the notion of yin and yang, that the feminine is the containing principle and the masculine is the penetrative, active principle. When I came to see you in France, I came to you to do very intensive work on leveling up my skill and ability and also my practice as a professional intuitive. And I was quite surprised about how much time we spent on the masculine and feminine principle. And I was feeling a lot of pressure as the breadwinner in my family. And we did really deep work that completely turned my worldview upside down. Specifically, you talked about the Shiva and Shakti framework for the masculine and feminine principle. Can you share with the listeners how you describe the Shiva and Shakti masculine and feminine energies?
Absolutely, with pleasure. This whole concept of feminine principle and yin, and then the masculine principle as yang, is a really quite a common and well-known concept. And I agree completely with you that we have this notion of the masculine principle as being penetrating and driving, and the feminine principle as being receptive and passive. And it's true. It's true to a certain extent. And then when we were working together, I was presenting to you another notion about that with the Shiva energy and the Shakti energy, because in fact, when we look at the Shiva energy, we're talking about a masculine principle. But it's not a masculine principle that's penetrating. It's a masculine principle that's holding the energy. It's like a posed mountain. It's a quiet strength. And so I was proposing this notion to you of the Shiva energy, the masculine principle, who is this divine energy who's sitting quietly holding the space, and the Shakti energy as actually being a kind of a little kind of firecracker, volcanic, here, there, and everywhere, popping in and popping out. That's what you're referring to?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was quite a different concept, and in fact, it's a concept that I'm quite passionate about, because I've been trying to make sense of it myself for many years. Because I've been perplexed about this. How does the divine feminine look compared to the kind of personified feminine, if you like? How does the personified masculine look compared to the divine masculine? Because it's almost like they inverse, they're back to front.
Mm.
And 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 it's really this notion of Shiva and Shakti, which belongs to Hindu philosophy and paints the picture of the feminine principle who who's here, there, and everywhere because she's in all the corners and she knows everything about what's going on, and she's an organizing principle, and that really, really looks and sounds a lot like women. Mm? And then the Shiva principle, which is this kind of, cool guy hanging out at home, right? And holding the energy so that, and that his Shakti woman goes out and, she's like this, she's out there like a little bee, going everywhere and gathering the nectar and bringing it back in and then coming back in and taking refuge with the Shiva hunk. Huh? That she comes home and takes refuge in Shiva. And because if we talk about divine consciousness, then there's this notion of Shiva, which is the masculine principle in its divine manifestation, is pure witness, pure observing, with no agenda, not doing anything other than just being there and holding the energy. And we find that in the witness self, in the observer self. Whereas the Shakti energy, the feminine principle, she's also like, she's in the emptiness, but she's filling up the emptiness with this creative unfolding fecundicity that she has, this incredible fertility that she has of giving birth, all of the time, and naming and engaging intimately with all that is. And I find that's a really beautiful description of the difference also between masculine and feminine energies. And when we look at, if we just look at men and we look at women and we try and look at them with fresh eyes, I find that very often we actually discover that most men, many men, they really have a kind of hermit part. Once they're with the woman that they want to be with, they're really quite happy to just sit back and hold the space.
Mm-hmm.
Provide for the space. Provide for the shelter. And we
Yeah.
see that the women are, they have their fingers in all of the pies. They know everything that's going on, and that's because they're there. They're fascinated about how the web holds together, and they also are instinctively web weavers. It's like I see our job is to keep the web intact, and we do that because we're natural networkers. Mm.
Yeah. Well, and of course, in my work, I do a ton of networking and public speaking, and and I feel like I'm on. When I'm working one on one with clients, I I love that image of weaving the web. I'm showing them their tapestry of what they have spun in their own life, and so then when I come home, yeah, I want my man to make me a cocktail and let me put my head on his chest. And I feel that ever since we had our sessions in France and we did this work, that even my husband, Ruben, as I shared with him the experiences I was having with you, I can say that since then, he has had his spiritual life broken open, and he's atheist. He's very supportive of what I do. He knows that some phenomenon is happening when I'm working with clients, but it's not really his thing, I would say. And yet he has been so empowered by this notion of holding space and reclaiming the strong silent type as being a perfect expression of the masculine. And we've reframed our language a lot. I don't call myself the breadwinner. We're both generative partners in our life. and we do it in different ways. And I'm in full on Shakti mode right now. So, of course, I'm going to be the one who's out, earning cash money and transacting with individuals. But meanwhile, he is the mountain that, holds that domestic space and keeps it safe. And it's been so empowering for us as a couple, even though it was my spiritual awakening. I'm wondering about your work with Tantric Women, the program that you have. Tell me how that transpired, what's it about, and why is that important work for women?
The series of seminars that I teach for the Tantric woman was really came into being for myself because I felt that it was imperative to be able to renew myself, um, and to be able to keep my sensual and sexual pelvic energy alive. I really needed to keep speaking to and encouraging the arising and expression of my own Shakti energy. And for me, that was particularly important after menopause, because there is a pretty strong collective idea in society that once you're menopaused, you're done and dusted, and you're done and dusted, and of course that's a complete fallacy, as every woman who's journeyed through menopause and come out the other side knows. You're only done and dusted if you believe that's what's going to happen to you. In fact, menopause is an amazing, rich and deep, and for many women very, very challenging passage, where what I understood from my journey through it was that it was there was a potential invitation in there, very, very strong, to reinvent myself, and to reinvent myself completely beyond the gaze of men. Because for sure you are not perceived anymore by men as as the same object that you were when you're an ovulating woman. You are your identity as a biologically, as a woman desirable at that level, that disappears. And so as women, I believe that we have the possibility to generate a different kind of beauty, which is this. It's the invitation par excellence to cultivate our inner beauty and to bring that beauty out through the cells of our body and to radiate that. But you can't do that if you're dead on the road. You have to be juicy to do that. You have to be juicy. You got to be a juicy woman, and there's a lot of different ways to be juicy, and to be juicy and to be gorgeous and to feel gorgeous, and so this whole Tantric Women series for me birthed actually out of my own difficulty of trying to work out how to do that, because I basically came from a culture where once you were menopaused, you were kind of like nobody was much really interested in you. And even though my own mother, she was in her own way, she kept herself going, or on some levels reinvented herself. The fact is that through time and through generations, more and more before, because also we all died younger, we don't have much modeling as women. We're really, really short on modeling what can you be and how can you look and what's allowable for you once you've gone through menopause. And there's more and more of us because we're living longer. And so but that said, the tantric women's work is not only for women who have menopaused. It's for any woman who wants to get in touch with her pelvic energy and get a direct live experience of what is your Shakti, what is the Kundalini energy, what is that life force energy when it moves through your pelvis, and how can you canalize it so that it comes up through your belly, so that you can use it to be sexual if you wish. You can use it to be sensual if you wish. You can use it to be creative as you wish. You can use it to love with as you wish. You can use it for talking if you wish. You can use it for clear seeing if you wish. That energy can go anywhere, and we have that capacity to learn how to use it. And as women, as men too, but I'm particularly focused on tantric, on women, because I am a woman, and because I think that there's lots and lots of ways that women still tend to doubt themselves. We still tend to fall back on the pattern that men are the defining reference points of what has value in the world. It doesn't matter how feminist we may have been or how deeply we love women. The fact is we still live in a patriarchal world. And so the values that we're defined by are patriarchal. And we're delirious if we think otherwise. We're deeply formatted by that patriarchal world. And so for me, a tantric woman she truly is a free woman. It doesn't mean that she doesn't love men. It doesn't mean that she doesn't love her sweetheart. It doesn't mean that she doesn't come home and take refuge in her sweetheart. But it means beyond that she's listening to her inner essence, and that she's honoring that inner essence, and that so that when she's saying yes, it's yes, and when she's saying no, it's no, and she's being true to herself.
So when you are giving seminars, what exactly are you doing? Because when I think of tantra, I think of I think of Sting having sex for 8 hours. Frankly, as a Shakti woman, I'm busy. I don't have time for that. So just sort of, in a nutshell, are you doing visualization exercises? Are you recommending masturbation? Like what is that exactly? If I were to go to a tantric woman seminar, what would I expect?
What you would, you wouldn't be making love for 8 hours because it's all women. And so we're not making love together. So you wouldn't be doing that unless that's what you decided what you wanted to be doing. But you wouldn't be doing that when we were in the group room. You would be you'd be working with a group of other women. In my world of tantric women, most of the women are heterosexual, and so most of those women are with men, and will go back home to their men. I will be teaching you to recognize what is your Shakti and how can you generate Shakti for yourself. What do you need to relax into? What do you need to drop down into? What do you need to let go of inside of yourself as limiting beliefs in order to become more familiar with the Shakti energy and to open up to it? Because there's nothing that the Shakti energy wants more than to flow freely in and throughout a human body. And so we will be looking at what does that mean for you? Have you had Shakti experiences? Do you recognize what it is? Do you know what Kundalini is? Do you know how that feels when it flows through you? And how can you welcome it? How can you breathe with it? How can you let it come up you? How can you let it come down through you? How does that you will be experiencing expanding your awareness so that you can step into, not step into so much as that, so you can open into a state of consciousness that's more non-dual than dual, so that you have a clear perception, so that you're open intuitively, so that you're open spiritually, so that you're stepping into divine states of consciousness where what is and what is evident to you. It's heart open space, compassionate space, wise space, accessing easy access to the truth of what is space. And from there, that Shakti energy is informing you and helping you to understand the simple and obvious truth about who you really are. And from there, basically, that would be like the first part of what we do, the training part, which we're working as a group, we're working in pairs, we're working in groups of three, all kind of combinations of experiential work. And basically from there, we're playing a lot, taking risks, doing what I call free fall exercises, where I'm encouraging you to expand your limits, to take risks, to trust, to develop faith, and to discover what you're capable of. We work about body image, we dress up, we explore all kind of different archetypes about who women can be. So we might be working with goddess energy, we might be working with slut energy, we might be working with virgin energy. I mean, we'll be looking at and exploring what are all the different kinds of identities that we can have, and how through all of those identities can we develop unconditional love and acceptance of all of those different identities, so that there is no shame, so that there's no guilt, so that there's no blame, so that there's no judgment, because every possible embodiment, every possible incarnation, every possible representation of the feminine principle comes from the universe, comes from the one. So we're also really, really working, I like to think, deeply and simply and honestly with reclaiming our innocence, because because as women, we really have been conditioned into believing, that we're wrong, that we're guilty. We're guilty if we're we're guilty if we're shy, we're guilty if we're too closed, we're guilty if we're too open. We've been programmed to carry heavy judgments about ourselves, and the fact is that that's wrong thinking. That's thinking that works against us, and we close down and we shrivel up and get dry because of that. And that's really a shame, because I believe that the world, the universe, needs us. Needs us to be silky, needs us to be soft, needs us to be open, needs us to be wet and juicy at every level of ourselves. And I'm not just talking about about pelvically.
Yeah,
but
clearly this isn't all about sex, obviously, because what you're talking about is spiritual self-esteem, is about claiming our space in the public sphere, is about gazing back at the male gaze. This is real. This is juicy stuff. I can't wait to bring you out here to do that.
Thank you. I tell you, this is really juicy, because the one thing that women know how to do better than anybody on the planet is that women know how to be intimate with all that is. And that's what a tantric woman and a tantric man knows how to do. I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah.
mind teaching tantric men groups, it's just that nobody's ever asked me to do it. But because, as a woman, I can teach that because that is what Tantra is. The whole philosophy of Tantra is not about sex. It's about intimacy. It's about connection. It's about energy. It's about welcoming and opening to and going deeper and becoming at one with whatever is. It's a teaching about intimacy. So I put us as women into a safe place. We take the men away because men are a distraction. And we work on cultivating what we know instinctively, but it's so instinctive, it's so natural for us that we just don't give ourselves credit for it. And what happens is that women in my tantric women groups, they get to realize, oh my God, I actually know how to do this. This is second nature to me. So I don't give it any value. Whereas in fact, it's our biggest competency, and it's what the world needs, because as you know, as I know, as anybody with any cultivated intelligence knows, you cannot harm somebody that you have true intimacy with. How can you? It's impossible. You would never want to harm somebody that you have connection and intimacy with, because it would be like harming yourself.
I want to talk again about what you were talking about with divine states of consciousness, because as you were describing, virgin states, slut states, these different archetypes of the female experience, I was thinking of Mary Magdalene. When I came to see you in France for several months beforehand, I was having dreams about this woman, and it took me a while to realize that it was Mary Magdalene in my dreams, and I didn't know very much about her. I didn't grow up in the church or anything like that. And as we were planning our trip, I kept noticing that information was coming to me about sacred sites in the south of France that were related to Mary Magdalene. And I had a very strong interest in other, groups like the Cathars and different people. But Mary Magdalene kept coming to me in different dreams and scenes and little signs, or a book at the bookstore that was right at the cash register, and I said, oh, is this for sale? And they said, yeah, I don't know why this is here. And then I just bought it, and it was all about Mary Magdalene. Within the first few minutes of sitting with you, I had shared with you that all of this was coming to me, and I really felt a strong call to go to La Grotte de la Sainte-Baume, where Mary Magdalene lived out her days, which is not very far from where we were in France. And you asked me, what is your interest in Mary Magdalene? And I said, I don't know. And you said, well, I've been researching her for 18 months or so, and you recommended to me the book by Cynthia Bourgeault, The Meaning of Mary Magdalene, Discovering the Woman at the Heart of Christianity. I devoured that book on my Kindle first because I was traveling, and then ordered it so that it would be waiting for me at home when I got there. I was absolutely enchanted with Mary Magdalene, and reading her story as written by this priest. I think she's Pentecostal or Episcopalian, and the writer is very measured in her research, because of course she wants her work to be accepted by the church. But basically, my interpretation is that Mary Magdalene essentially was channeling. She was what you're describing as the tantric woman. She was apostle to the apostles. And isn't it interesting that the woman at the heart of Christianity has also experienced her feminine self, her feminine expression, being bound by men. You talked about men set the parameters for the feminine expression, and she is such an amazing example of that. What a powerful incredibly articulate and devout woman who was then relegated to the sidelines as a prostitute, which wasn't even true. Tell me about your interest in Mary Magdalene and how she came into your consciousness.
Yeah, so that was all, everything that you said, really, really interesting. And thank you for mentioning the name of that book, because I would say anybody interested in knowing more about Mary Magdalene could read that book, because it's brilliant, and it was so well researched, and and so giving back to Mary Magdalene the place that I believe that Jesus Christ certainly gave to her, and which was then unfortunately taken away from her. My interest in Mary Magdalene actually started because um, I'm more, when it comes to the divine feminine energies, I've been more following the Buddhist tradition, or the Hindu traditions, and so I've been more involved with divine principles like Shakti, or or like Kuan Yin, because I've just been more comfortable in that world. I was raised in a Christian world, but I was raised in a non-religious family, but nonetheless in a religious culture, and Judeo-Christian culture. And so I kind of put Christianity over to the side at a fairly young age, and but at the same time have always felt an affinity with the Christ energy, and really had nothing against it, and have been so-called visited by that Christ energy at different important moments in my life. And so I have a real deep tenderness and desire to honor that being, that, like I would call Jesus Christ. But I never, ever spent any time reflecting about Mary Magdalene or Mother Mary or Holy Mother. I mean, for me, those were secondary figures in the theatre of Christianity, because that was the kind of programming I received, which is the kind of programming that every Christian receives. It's a patriarchal vision, and so for me, my introduction to Mary Magdalene was that basically at some point in the last couple of years, she just stepped forward into my consciousness, and I don't know, touched me in a really, really deep place. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that I had a religious conversion, because that's just not true. But something like that happened to me. When I was involved in my spiritual practice, in my tantric practice, at a certain point, it was like I became inhabited, not just by Mary Magdalene, but really by all of the Marys. It was like I was suddenly found myself in the presence of all of the Marys. And at that moment of the crucifixion, or shortly, thereafter, of Jesus, and it was a really deeply heart-rendering experience for me, because I felt in that moment that I touched not only the horrible, the intolerable, unacceptable suffering of a woman, a mother, a sister, a lover, to losing a dearly beloved, but I also touched this incredible deep acceptance and understanding of that. And I touched also the wisdom that holds that. This intolerable, unacceptable event happens, and it had to happen. and like everybody knew it was going to happen, and everybody had their part to play. And the Marys who were holding the space, this is my perception, holding the space for that unfolding of the Christian story, and they're like really the unsung heroines of that story, because Jesus went on the cross and, died and was resurrected and left again, but, they stayed. They stayed, and they carried the grief. They carried the grief, and they carried the injustice, and she carried the torch of their tantric union, because in my understanding of Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ, they were a tantric couple. They were practicing alchemy. They were practicing the transmutation between them, and she was his true wife, his truly sacred holy wife, and she was recognized by the other Marys as being that. And so she really was a saint. And then in the church in France, at this place, this location of Saint Baume, she was recognized as a saint by that lineage of Christianity. And but that's a very, very small little church, right, that recognizes her in that role. And it's one of the things that I probably really, really appreciate actually about France is that the French have some kind of instinctive, really pleasant way of honoring the feminine principle that we don't find, I don't think, as much in some other cultures around the world. But I have always found that the French people, they love their mums, they love their mums. That they love their women. They're not afraid. They're not afraid about that feminine principle. The feminine principle has a value to be soft, to be sweet,
and
to
there
be
are many, many sacred places that honor the feminine throughout the south of France. I mean, and throughout France, of course.
Yeah.
And yes, you're right. You do notice it in the culture,
Yeah.
and it really, I did feel it in different areas. Particularly, there's the forest down below as you approach the mountain where the grotto, her cave, Mary Magdalene's cave is. And as you go through the forest, there are two roads. There's the King's Road, and then there's sort of the back road. And the forest itself is enchanting. It really is so lovely. And when you go the back road, I found it a perfect balance for the King's Road. Where everything is, the King's Road is very, it's plowed and it's wide and it's more like a boulevard. And then the other road, which I think has more of the feminine principle, is about discovery, and there are corners and turns and there's revelation, because you have to sort of climb around different rocks, and the stairs have been hand wrought and made of different roots and stones, and it's true that it may not be on purpose, but there's an instinctive honoring of the balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine principles that come together in the one. And of course, how lovely that those two roads lead to the grotto, the cave where Mary Magdalene stayed all those days. Now, the book is really, yes, I agree. Anybody who wants to know about Mary Magdalene should be looking for Cynthia Bourgo's book, and the link to find that will be in the show notes on the blog. But it's very tantalizing, the conversation we've just had, for anybody who hasn't read the book, because it's sort of like, who are all these Marys? And the book will describe who the real story of the relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus and the other Mary, who was a sister. But also, the book goes into the gospel according to Thomas and also the gospel of Mary Magdalene. And and even I think there's also the Gospel of Philip. So she was not only recognized, whether or not as a consummate partner of Jesus, whether or not you want to go there or not, to think that she and Jesus actually had sex. Personally, I think so, but the book certainly stays neutral on that. However, Mary Magdalene was elevated as the spouse of Jesus, not only by the women, but also by the men. And it wasn't until about 400 AD that the church depromoted her, or whatever. That was demoted her.
And I think the essence, one of the essential messages of that book is that, whether they were having sex or not is up for discussion. But the fact is, they were practicing tantra together. They were breathing together. They were being together. They were healing together. They were practicing alchemy together, energetic alchemy. And that seems to be obvious. And so I found, that was what was really amazing for me about that book, and which really reconciled me with a certain notion, that I had of Christianity, which I found it, I generally found it pretty dry and as a religion, and I'm a real fan of Tantra. And it just resonated in me, deeply, deeply, deeply in me, to understand that the Christian teaching is a very, very, very deep wisdom teaching. It's a teaching that points us towards non-duality. And I mean, I knew that theoretically, but the way that, I was taught to get there through Christianity, I found that dry and boring. Whereas for me, if somebody tells me, join in connection, and reveal yourself heart to heart, and melt and merge and skin drink and soul drink with another person, and that you can do that through following the Christian teaching, I mean, I'm suddenly really, really interested in following that teaching.
Yes, exactly.
because it's juicy. And there's deep love in it. And there's going to be joy in it.
Yes, and you talked about, we don't have a lot of models of women who, claim their voice, claim their power, particularly after a certain time of life. And when I think about Mary Magdalene, I mean, it's never, her story of living as a hermitess for 30 years is never written anywhere. Nobody talks about that. It's like, oh, she was a prostitute and then, probably went on to do that. But no, her voice and her teaching, her leading of the apostles before they all sort of scattered through the Mediterranean is very much, I would say, responsible for the dissemination of Jesus' message throughout the world. And so here we have a wonderful model of an archetype that deserves to be restored. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and wisdom today with Shakti and Tantric Woman and Mary Magdalene. As you know, at the end of the show, there's the question from the Proust questionnaire from Marcel Proust, which is just so perfect since you're in France. So the question for you today is, what do you value most in your friends?
What do I value most in my friends? I value honesty most in my friends. For me, that would be what I love the most in a good friend, is somebody that I can go to and I can tell them my story, whatever my story is, whatever the drama, the burning issue of the day is, or whatever it is that's preoccupying me. And I can say to them, tell me, what do you think and feel about that? What's your hit on that? And what I value is that they will be completely real and transparent with me and share with me what they really think. In other words, they will not say something just to please me. I mean, I don't mind if they please me as well, because I really love it if they'll do that, because that's another thing I like, that no matter what I do or what I say or what happens, they love me and accept me unconditionally. When I think about my friends, my really good friends, the friends that I have over time, it's just that way that, it doesn't matter what happens to us, we keep being there for each other. So there's that being honest, being absolutely authentic and real, and also just hanging in there, being there, no matter what.
That's great. Thank
That's
you.
what matters for me.
Thank you so much for being real and authentic and honest and being here with me today. I so appreciate that about you too, Judee. Thank you.
You are very, very welcome. And for me, this was an absolutely intriguing and delightful conversation. And I have to tell you, I learnt quite a lot through this conversation today. So I thank you for that. I learned something about what I do in my work.
That's perfect. Excellent.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you, Judee.
God bless you.
She's so right, isn't she? There are a lot of different ways to be juicy. Remember in the beginning of the conversation, it was a long conversation, but remember in the beginning when Judee was talking about Shiva and Shakti energy? I was so enchanted and romanced by what she said about Shiva as pure witness with no agenda, that masculine energy that just holds the space. I love that idea that the strong silent type is a containing energy. And then Shakti and her fecundity and fertility, how she fills the space, naming and engaging with all that is. I just loved how Judee put that. Today's show notes can be found on my website, carmenspagnola.com, CarmenSpagnola. And that's where you'll find more information about Judee and about the book, The Meaning of Mary Magdalene by Cynthia Bourgo. And I want to thank you so much for listening. Did you know that the Numinous podcast has listeners in 33 countries? I was shocked and amazed and thrilled to discover that. So thank you so much, Kazakhstan. I don't know who you are, but thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed the show, please share it far and wide. And of course, I appreciate your review on iTunes. Thank you, everybody who has reviewed and subscribed. If you'd like to keep exploring the great mystery of life with me, you can go to my website, carmenspagnola.com, and click the link for the Numinous School, my online intuition development course. While you're there, sign up for my monthly email newsletter. You'll instantly receive a meditation download, and you'll get something free from me every month. Until next time,